Yo, everybody, what is up after a 1 week hiatus because I was all over the place? We are back, and it is Flyers Talk A2D. You miss a week, you miss a ton, apparently. A lot to talk about. We got a 3-game win streak. We have John Tortorella fired. Weren't able to touch on that last week, so we're going to touch on that this week. We're also going to talk about what coaching options are out there that might be a really good fit for the Flyers moving forward to take this team to the next level. Also, Michkov, Jesus, hit that like, hit that subscribe. Come chat some a little hockey with us. Let's go. It's time to talk some puck.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of Flyers Talk A2D right here on A2DRadio.com. I am Matt Sitsuti along with the Dark Wing, Brian Daly.
Apparently, it's my fault, according to some people in the chat.
I mean, it's always been your fault. So,
Still doesn't
and
work.
along with the broken one, Rob Povia.
What's up, fam? Missed you guys.
Yeah. And Mr. Blue Shirt, Mr. Broadway, Mr. Switzerland, Big Bad Brad Ryer.
Great to be back, guys.
And tonight, as always, we are brought to you by Specialized Physical Therapy, the Dr. Paul Vidal. If you got any aches and pains that are giving you no end of frustration, hit up the doc at www.specializedphysicaltherapy.com. And then after you make an appointment, you can either head to Cherry Hill or Burlington, New Jersey. And after a few sessions with them, you'll be pretty good. You'll feel as good as new. And then you'll be back to doing what you love to do. And the poll question for today is: the firing of John Tortorella has lit a fire under the Flyers, which has led to their recent success in the last 3 games. Agree or disagree? I love how it says the firing of John Tortorella has lit a fire.
I didn't think about that. I was so tired last night.
I'm just busting balls. So anyway.
What else? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh, the fuck you fucking asshole. Make fun of me and my fucking Twitter poll. All right, so, gentlemen, how do you feel? Do you feel that it has lit a fire under the Flyers? Do you feel like they're playing with a little bit of zeal now that Torts is no longer in charge of the bench?
Absolutely, and you're seeing it. And a lot of times you're going to see this initially after a coach is fired, whether they like the guy or not. It's a message sent to not just the guys on the roster, but the locker room as a whole, including the coach's room, saying that, hey, listen, things are not good right now. I don't think it was necessarily purely performance is what led to Torts' firing. I think there's a lot more to it. I definitely don't think that what he's done this far as head coach was a terrible thing. I definitely think he's got the best out of some of them. And there's other situations that I think that kind of came into play here. I mean, his comments after the game in Toronto definitely didn't help his situation. Basically saying, and I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember the quote off the top of my head, is basically somewhere along the lines, I don't know how to coach a team in this situation. That's essentially to me saying, I'm going to start throwing in the towel. I have nothing else. Don't know what to do here. So as a head coach in the NHL, that's probably one of those cards you want to leave closer to your chest and maybe talk to Danny about that in private, not necessarily in a post-game interview. And I'm sure there's more to it, but I mean, this team is playing better. I mean, even TK's come out and said that, we need to be a better team. Like, we need to not let this coaching situation be what gets us going, because Bradshaw does have a little bit of that same Tortorella fire under him, but it's not to the same level. But, I definitely think there's a fire lit. I think these guys are going to continue to hold themselves accountable for what's happened over the last 2-3 weeks of poor hockey. And I think we're going to see them have a strong finish moving forward based off of just what we've seen the last 3 games. It's like a whole nother team.
Yeah, so My opinion on it, I feel like I agree. Usually, when you have a coach removed, you're going to get a reaction. It's natural to get a reaction because it's a big message being sent, and it doesn't matter what the message is. You're still going to get the reaction. It could be because, oh, well, the players aren't playing well and the coach has lost control over the team, so you fire him that way. It's a way of saying, hey, step up, play better than that, because look at what can happen when you don't do your job. Or it could be in this case with Torts, where he made comments that he probably shouldn't have made, shot his mouth off when he shouldn't have shot his mouth off, and next thing you know, he's getting pulled into a room being told, okay, that's it, we're done. If you had a problem, you should have come to me. But now we're going to have to go this route, basically. And, it's one of those things where it's going to send a message to your players. It's going to wake them up. It's going to make them realize, ooh, okay, might need to do something. Yeah, might need to do something. Message just got sent.
On a lighter note, this room is really lit well.
Yeah, you don't have to use a ring
Pretty
light
bright.
like I do.
It's
Yeah.
pretty bright in here. I'm not gonna lie. I'm actually pleasantly surprised with that.
Well, there you go. And you thought it was going to be a problem.
Honestly, I didn't know. I had no idea where I was doing the show. I had no idea where I was going to be winding up doing the show. I didn't know if I was going to be doing it from my bed, my couch, or
Or
that
your
was
car.
really the only two options. It's a new
Would've been
place.
real
I'm still
funny.
trying to figure this out.
Would have been funny if you were doing it from your car while you're driving down the road, talking about how Torts got his ass fired. And you're like,
Pull over
oh
this
shit,
guy
almost
at
hit somebody.
295.
All right, so Robbie, how do you feel about it?
Sort of lying in between you boys. I mean, I agree with the poll. It inevitably did. I mean, although this has not been three great teams that the Flyers have beaten, so I'm not, let's pump the brakes there. But their play couldn't have gotten much worse leading up to the firing, right? To Brian's point. And this is kind of like switching goaltenders in the middle of a shellacking. The guys obviously quit playing for him, quit listening to him, and Torts' comments to the media speaks for themselves, as you said. They are an example of why I disliked Torts in the past. But he came in here, he did what he needed to do. He fulfilled his purpose. He installed discipline, hard work, accountability, to Brian's point again, and a winning attitude into the culture, which was sorely missed. Now it's clear time for a new voice, one that'll help take these guys to the next level and welcome in the young blood.
Yeah, to build off of something that you just said there, Robbie, like the accountability. They said during the game, Ashlyn Sullivan of NBC Sports was saying that she was talking to Nick Seeler, and Tortorella left a note for them after he was fired. And they didn't obviously go into the details on what the note was said, which is great. It's for the locker room. There's no need to make it public. But basically, it was saying something along the lines of, don't lose the locker room. Don't lose playing the game the right way. This is a special group. This is a special locker room. Keep moving forward, and basically wishing them the best of luck. So, that goes to show you that Tortorella is not the guy that he used to be. I don't know if he's ever done that before, but it definitely shows me how much he thinks of this group to be able to do something like that. So that could have been something that led to this team playing a little bit better too. But like you said, Robbie, these guys are holding themselves accountable, and I think that's a major Torts move.
Yeah, I mean, with 9 games left, obviously, little altercations with Cam York. He never really saw eye to eye with Michkov, even beyond the language barrier. It got to a point where that hard-nosed coach was getting stale to the young players here, right? Mm-hmm. And eventually, Torts is going to write checks that his ass can't cash, and And there was a lot of speculation out there saying that, well, maybe the Flyers said, hey, we want you to lose out the rest of the season, improve our draft standing, and he just refused to coach that way. Well, I think we put those rumors to bed with 3 straight wins, that they're not in the market for losses, that they are trying to improve this team. And I mean, in the end, I question why he had to do it 9 games in, but I really think it was an example of his hot head forcing his hand, knowing the writing was on the wall. Brian, you talked about how Torts not signing an extension before this year really put the writing on that wall.
Yeah, honestly, I thought that at the end of the year they were going to want to put him in a front office position to get him nice and cozy in a chair up in that press box with Danny and Jonesy, but I think that altercation with Cam York was really the icing on the cake. It says we got to get this guy out of the organization. Keith Yandel and Brian Whitney of Spit and Chicklets are reporting that apparently Torts told York, if you re-sign, I'll bury you. So I don't know how true that is. I've seen multiple reports on that. Like, it's coming from Ryan Whitney and Spit and Chicken, so I take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But Keith Yandel, I'm sure, still has friends within the league. I'm sure he still has, from his time with the Flyers, still has friends in the locker room. So he does have probably a little bit more finger on the pulse. But, I mean, if you're coming out there and you're saying that to her, which I don't necessarily know if I believe, at that point, you have to get the guy out of the organization. You have to cut ties, and because that's going to lead to nothing good, even if Tortorella doesn't have his hand on the everyday roster.
So, with that being said, go to Brad. Brad, obviously, you have been down this path before. Having seen the best and worst of Torts as he coached the New York Rangers. So what's your take on all this?
Okay, well, first, I think the situation was a little different with the Rangers, okay, because the Rangers, he had gotten the Rangers to the playoffs, and the Rangers were looking to go to the next level, and Glenn Sather wanted him to lighten up with blocking shots and have the offense a little bit more wide open. Because if you recall, they had guys like Marty St. Louis on the team and Brad Richards, and they had a lot of talent, and Nash and those guys, and they had a lot of talent. I mean, he built them from Brandon Dubinsky and Ryan Callahan to those guys, and Lundqvist was getting angry because they were blocking too many shots and they were screening him, and he was starting to give up bad goals because they were screening him all the time. It was a whole big mess. And Tortorella said, basically, if you don't like it, too bad, then I'm leaving. And then Sather kind of said, all right, no, you're not leaving, you're fired. It's the same thing with him. He's one of these guys that has a termination date the second you hire him. I mean, he'll teach you how to play the right way, but eventually the players end up hating him because he's Tortorella. He can't help himself. He's like the dog with a bone. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he can't help himself but become miserable and nasty and just shoots himself in the foot all the time. And he did the same thing with the Flyers, feuding with players. I mean, with him, it was Kreider, which can't say I blame him because Kreider has always been kind of a lazy player. And the only one who really figured him out was Gallant, I guess. But it's always him feuding with the players, and that's nothing really changed. And these guys, look, I don't like the fact that I think that they quit on him. And I think he could see that, and I think he got so angry that he wanted to be fired, and that's why he made those comments. And then all of a sudden he kind of backtracked a little bit because he's like, oh, you know what? If I say that, nobody else will ever hire me. So maybe I should rethink what I just said. And then he tried to backpedal, and at that point it's too late. You can't do stuff like that. You just can't, especially with this generation. I just think I hate to say this because I mean I'm not exactly a youngster either. Okay, but I think he's too old to coach this generation. You know?
Yeah, and Brian's talked about a move to the front office might be better suited for him based on that age, Brad.
Yeah, look, I don't think he's going to go back to the Flyers and do something like that. Now, I've heard Ranger
some
fans,
other team maybe. Yeah,
yeah, I've heard Ranger fans asking to get him back because they'll hold the players accountable, and I say no, don't do that. If you want a guy to hold, if you're going to do that, just bring in Keenan. I mean,
Right.
you know,
still alive?
I mean, at least Keenan won us a cup, you know. But don't bring him back because you know what? There's too many knuckleheads in our team right now. He'll just it'll be a massive revolution and a bloodbath. So can't bring him to our team. As much as I wouldn't mind seeing it, no.
So,
But he'll go somewhere. He'll go somewhere.
So out of the ashes of the John Tortorella firing, a phoenix has now risen, and that phoenix has been the team itself, which has managed to scrape together 3 straight victories, and just recently getting their 3rd straight yesterday on the Nashville Predators 2-1.
Well, they were embarrassed, Matt. So, you know, being embarrassed sometimes brings out the best of you. You know, you can't fire 20 hockey players, so you fire the coach.
Right. So after getting those 3 straight wins, beating the Nashville Predators, who are woefully underplaying right now, you could say that for their whole season. Basically, at the end of the day, the Flyers have kind of felt a surge before the tail end here of the season. So, gentlemen, I got to ask, with this Flyers win streak, I mean, obviously the big stories that we've been talking about, obviously the John Tortorella firing, but another one that should come up is Michkov, who has been just lighting the lamp up left and right, and on top of that, getting on the assist sheet, currently leading the pack in rookies for goals. JJ brought up a good point yesterday, saying that if the Flyers' power play had been more productive, he probably would have been ahead by a comfortable margin, which I could agree to for a certain extent. So my question is, gentlemen, with what we've been seeing from Michkov, do you think that he's got it? Do you think he's got enough? Or do you think that he still has a little bit more to go? How do you feel on it? Do you think he's got enough to get the Calder?
I think he's done enough. Certainly, if you look at goals and points, maybe you got to look at team success too. So, I mean, that might give Lane Houston with Montreal, right? He's one of the rookie. Montreal's having, who expected them to be in the playoff talk. So that might be a little bit bolstering his, ballot for it. But I mean, you got to give it to a Flyer one of these years, don't you?
You'd love to see it. I would, but I mean, outside of hockey, you look at the political aspect with everything right now. Do you really want to give it to a Russian? But like, if we're talking like straight up honest, like he's been just absolutely white hot. I think he's got 11 points in those last 4 games or something along those lines. He's got 7 in his last 3. He's just completely let off the leash since Tortorella's been gone, and he's just been going batshit crazy. I just don't think he's been as consistent as Lane Hudson or Macklin Celebrini, which I think is going to be your top 2. But I think and if Dylan pops into the chat, I would love it right now because he's going to love this answer. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Dustin Wolf. I think he's been one of the better goaltenders in the league. I think he's been an underrated rookie all season long. Calgary is not in the position they're in without Dustin Wolf. So I think there's a few guys here that you can definitely argue Michkov. I just don't think Michkov has the consistency as Celebrini has had all season long, as Hudson has had all season long, as Dustin Wolf has had all season long. Definitely an argument to be made. But when they go to write about, or go to vote on who the Calder Trophy's winner is going to be, at least it's not going to be Cutter. But no,
that's a hot take from you.
Yeah, I mean, he's been great of late, but he hasn't been consistent all year.
Of the year. No way.
I don't think that Michkov is going to get it. And it's not because of that he hasn't earned it or hasn't deserved. I just think the guys that are going to be voted ahead of him have just shown more consistency than he has.
He's played more though.
He has played more. Absolutely.
He's played way more than I thought he would in his rookie year.
Speaking of, look what I found.
Ah, nice.
In a Flyers jersey.
There you go.
But yeah, I think Michkov winds up finishing fourth, and I don't think it's because of anything bad. I just think the other guys have consistently just been more there.
So with that, obviously we talk about Michkov and the race for the Calder, which seems to be, I would say, is the main focus right now towards the end of the season. Hopefully to see him possibly getting that opportunity to hoist that trophy. But besides that, of course, we also like to see a lot more. We like to see the fact that the Flyers have had more, I guess you would say, more push in the offensive zone. Defensively, they're still inconsistent, but to be fair, they've been inconsistent all year defensively. Goaltending wise, for the most part, I think we could safely say that there's still work to be done for that particular situation. But overall, I would say as we draw to a close for this season, I think we can all say that the Flyers lived up to the truth of what Danny said. He figured that they would take a step back, and they did. So I guess we could say, you know what? Danny knew what he was talking about. He is the GM. So we can't ever say Danny doesn't know his team. He absolutely knew the team at that moment. He said, we're probably going to take a step back here. And he was absolutely right. So
I mean, to be fair, it's I mean, I think he knew that they were going to be making the changes that they did. They say what you want about what they did with the Flyers this year, but you subtracted a lot from this roster. Farabee, Frost, Lawton. There's somebody else that I'm blanking on, but it's tough because SJM, I'm in Maple Shade. That's pretty awesome. And appreciate you, Priz. No on the housewarming, and yeah, I'm in Maple Shade, so I'm near Cherry Hill. But knowing the expectation that this team was going to subtract from the roster just to free up some cap space, I think that said a lot for what Danny was anticipating for this team to do this year. And I think it was going to be more so they're going to take the step back later into the season with the subtractions of getting guys off the books that probably weren't going to re-sign, or guys that were underperforming to where they needed to give them a fresh start so they can have an opportunity to kind of be a little bit have a more opportunity to try and get some more minutes and open up some holes for some of these young guys that are getting ready to come through, like a Bonk, a Barkley, a guy who we haven't even really talked about much this season is Alex Bump. He's having a fantastic year, and in order for these young guys to get time, you got to free up some of these spaces, and I think that's what Danny was anticipating when he said that this team was going to take a step back this year.
So out of that, I could definitely say, because actually we're only 1 week left in the season, 2 weeks left in the season.
April 17th.
Yeah.
So about 2
last
weeks. Yeah, okay. So about 2 weeks left in the season. So could definitely say this right now. Who would you say was so far, I mean, since most of the season's in the rear view, what would you say was probably the biggest surprise this year for you guys, for the Flyers? I mean, out of all the players, out of all of the coaching, out of everything, anything, what was the biggest surprise that you guys found this year from the Flyers?
I'd say
Both negative
Risto.
and positive. Risto? That's a good get. That's a good one to throw up there. Risto had a really solid year.
Yeah, because I've been the first one who's been tearing him up limb from limb for the last couple of years, and you know what? He had a real solid season. And if he could build off of that and take it to the next level next season, that would really be nice.
Right. Right. I would say the biggest surprise for me, I would say the growth that I saw from Fedotov, and also from the play that I saw from literally one of the more underlined players that I feel has really been contributing more to the Flyers' play as the season has gone along. And I definitely like what Jamie Drysdale has been doing and really continuing to perform at a very good level. And I like what he's been doing. I thought Cam York was solid at times. Tyson Forster, I think, had some solid moments as well. Tippett, the drive is there. Sometimes the finish isn't. But I will say that some of the players surprised me with a lot of their performances of, okay, they're getting it. It's getting there. The potential's there. And you see it. And sometimes they tap into it. It's just getting it more consistently is going to be the key moving forward.
Certainly. Drysdale staying healthy to tack onto you could be surprising too. And that's a good sign for his future, making that trade more evenly balanced out. For me, guys, I think Noah Cates being your top center is the biggest surprise in the positive sense. And not that I didn't see what, everybody saw what this kid did in college, but he sort of was like leveling off, maybe like ticketed for a bottom six role. And he's shown that he could play top 6 minutes in this league and play it effectively well. So definitely, Benny, like Noah Cates. On the negative side, surprising, I'm surprised that the Flyers still have 3 damn bloody goaltenders. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, are you just doing Coleslaw a favor so he can make NHL money and make him happy and rear him? Okay, cool, but it's just not effective. I really think that if you like to Maddie's point, if Danny B saw this team taking a step back, then why did you not trade Sam Harrison? When you had an opportunity, maybe you didn't get the value that you wanted, but he was never even really talked about that much. He was more talked up and built up to be the number one goaltender until all of a sudden it was a tandem now, in Tortorella's words. But I just think that if you want, you're rebuilding this team and you want the young kids to develop, well, you've got to give them an opportunity to play. And Koloslov has not played that much, even on the AHL level. He's improved, right, and his development, so that's good, but he's just not getting enough reps, and I think it's because it's the pipeline is log jammed. In the end, maybe they're just thinking, well, we're just piecemealing stuff because ultimately who we see as our franchise goaltender is not one of these 3 at all, and it's Carson Bjornsson.
Or Zavrigan.
Right.
Or Zavrigan. So, I mean, that's one of my surprises, too, was the fact that they didn't trade any of the goalies at the trade deadline. I definitely thought one of them was going to be gone, just to kind of shore things up a little bit more for that position. And I agree with you, LJ. I mean, I was saying since the beginning of the year, I think this is going to be a big weak spot for the Flyers is going to be the goaltending if they can't put it together. And they have flashes where they look really, really good. And they have flashes where they look just downright terrible, where everything is just going in. And I realize that that's a lot of different goaltenders throughout the year. But, I mean, you got to figure out a way to get some good consistent goaltending all season long. The other thing that I was surprised about, and I'm actually taking one of Benny's because Benny brought up a great point, was Owen Tippett's production drop off. That to me was a big surprise this year. Especially after last year, expected him to take a big step forward in signing that contract. He's got to figure out ways to score goals. And I understand there's going to be some people who, there's going to be seasons where he's going to be off. There's going to be seasons where he's going to be just on. But, he's making big boy bucks now. So you got to figure out ways to consistently score.
Here's the problem with that. You can't use that as an excuse to say he's going to have some good years, he's going to have some bad years, because everyone's going to look back on that trade and remember who they traded to Florida to get him.
Yeah.
And that's not something that you can fall back on. Like, oh, he'll just have an off year. Like, no, that's not a good enough excuse. You traded your captain away to get him in the first place.
Another one of these young players that signed a big contract, and all of a sudden he shits the bed. He shits the bed. I mean, we have one on our team, Mr. Lafreniere, gets off to a great start, and then the Rangers extend him, and now all of a sudden he's been invisible for 3 months.
Yeah.
Sometimes these guys, when they get the money, they lose their edge a little bit. They got to get that edge back.
Yeah. SJM, I see him at my job at least once a month. Ilya Bryzgalov. I see Hartsey in there a lot too. Scott Hartnell. Yeah, I mean, this is a guy you put a lot on, and you would think being signed to the extension that he got would take a lot of the pressure off, so he can work a little bit easier. But you're not seeing that. He's definitely going to need a rebound year. I'm going to give him a pass this year because I'm sure there's probably more going on in that locker room than we care to admit with Tortorella this year, and so maybe that was weighing on him. We'll see how kind of things go. I mean, just look at what some of these guys have been doing since. I mean, they've scored 13, 14 goals in 3 games. Since Tortorella left in Toronto, like that's, we'll see what happens. But
Owen Tippett has to anymore.
Well, I mean, Owen Tippett has to give himself something to build off of heading into next year to get himself off to a really good start, depending on who the coach winds up being for the Flyers, which I have a couple of really, really good names for you guys, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But what I want everybody else to do in the meantime is hit that like, hit that subscribe, tell your friends about us, turn on the notifications, and never miss anything A2D has to offer. You know what to do.
Are the players just giving a big FU to Torts, saying like, now you're gone, so what you're going to insult us as a team? Well, this is what we're capable of. But again, I digress back to where we began, and that's this was Montreal, which playoff team right now, so no disrespect, but Buffalo and Nashville are god awful. So cool the Jets, like they look good. Bradshaw is probably letting players like Michkov run a little freer than Torts, but he still has a similar style. So and we've seen this team be really good on transition all year long. So it's been there. Maybe guys, it's good that the discipline and the hard work and the accountability was instilled, but then it began to be, don't piss off Dad, right? And guys were playing too afraid to be sat, too afraid to be healthy scratched. There was rumors that and excuse me if you said this before, Brian, that Torts told Cam York, if you resign here, I'm going to bury you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like eventually, this guy, he wore out his welcome. It's a shame. I hope it doesn't overshadow, though, that there has progress been made here. I mean, you're not going to hear from a bolt of the Philadelphia fan base because the results are 3 years of missed playoffs, and last year being where you were in position heading in towards the last week of the season and got knocked out. So, but in the end, you got to look more about team building and what they're doing here. And we'll get into other coaching options and where you go from there in the second half of the show.
Yeah, and that's where the note came from that Ashlyn Sullivan was reporting about, saying that don't lose the locker room, continue to play the game the right way, respect the game, and all that. And I think that's something that he instilled very well into this team. But I do think there were other things that happened that nobody's telling us about that, again, I don't think this was a performance-based firing. I think there's so much more to it that will probably be coming to light over the next few months, especially into the off season. And it's a point where it is what it is, and now this team just has to respond, use it as a building block, and start building the foundation for something that's going to be hopefully better for next year, and this team takes a step forward.
So SJM was asking, is there any validity to Rick Tocchet coming back to Philly? Well, right now he's still coaching Vancouver.
God, I hope not.
And Vancouver's really not out of the playoffs. They're actually pretty close to the playoff line. So I don't know.
This is his last year. He has a team option for next year. With the job in Philadelphia becoming open, maybe he does walk. And like, I mean, if we're going to dive right into it, I'm going to say that I could really see that probably, who the Philly winds up getting to fill their head coaching spot. It's been the MO, right? Hire former Flyers. It works, right? No. But if he does leave Vancouver, his fiery coaching style is congruent with Torts' styles. So to Swoopy's point, who I haven't seen him in the chat tonight, but he's made it that you want players that fit a system. And if you're going to get a whole new coach, then are you starting at square one again with what you've built up over the past 2 seasons? So at least Tocchet would be a little more congruent, so the team would miss, less of a beat. But come on, another former Flyer. Wow. All right. Who I think should get this job is the head coach of the University of Denver, if he's willing to leave that position. And that's Carl.
Yes. That's my number one, baby. That's my Rob. This one would keep you around. That's what I'm talking about. That's my number one. I do have a number two, but
he's won 2 national championships in the past 2 seasons. Yeah, 2022 and 2024. And on that 22 team, Bobby Brink was on that team too. So you got a level of familiarity there. He led Team USA to back-to-back World Juniors.
Mm-hmm.
He's 35, real wet behind, young as fuck, but perfect to grow with this team and identify with the young guys, which Tortorella clearly was not.
Yes, I'm not on the Tocchet bandwagon at all. I just skip over him. Let him stay in Vancouver. I'm all on the David Carl to build off a little bit more of what Robbie was saying. Carl has yet to lose a game in World Juniors. He's one of the most decorated hockey coaches and has built one of the best programs in college hockey. He has worked with guys in the NHL before, and I get it. You got the whole Dave Haxel. He's a much better coach than Dave Haxel. He knows how to build a program. He's literally built his program from the ground up.
But also, Dave Haxtell was also inheriting a team that wasn't necessarily young. He was inheriting a team of veterans as well.
Sure.
So a little bit of a different ball game with that. However, there were a few young guys on that team when he took over that prospered. Again, I've said this before, I'll say it again. We were worried about Coots being a bust. And then when Haxtell showed up, Coots' game got way better after that. So Coots was still young at the time. So that might actually amplify that to most of the team now, because most of it's young guys now, as opposed to it being mostly veterans.
And his brother is back, Carl, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Matt Carl and Danny B played together. So
Mhm.
That
there's
they
a
did.
connection there too.
Mhm.
Yeah. I'm liking
Yep.
more.
Yeah.
The more we're talking about this, the
Mm.
more I'm liking it.
Yeah, Matt
I-
Carl was on that 2010 team.
I do have one more that I think, Robbie, you might like. However, I will say this. It goes against everything that we've just talked about. Bringing back former Flyers. I think this guy is going to be a great fit. I think he's something that the Flyers are looking for because he can build a team. He's all about team atmosphere. He's all about team culture. He's all about playing for the sweater, not the name on the back. If he becomes available, Flyers have to go after Rod Brind'Amour. I think he'd be a perfect fit to be a Flyers head coach for that all those reasons.
Well,
Team guy. He's all about team building,
He's
team
under
bonding.
contract, though, isn't he?
I think he's in the final year. But even if he doesn't, I mean, if they don't win the Stanley Cup, I don't see how they keep him. How many more chances are you going to give the guy?
So are we saying that we are cheering for Carolina's demise in the Stanley Cup playoffs?
I am.
Okay.
First round out.
Brad would have no problem
Bring
with
Roddy
that.
back up. I'll go get him. Bring Hot Rod back up. Listen, tell me. I know where he is. I know where the PNC Arena is.
Hey,
I'll go get him.
if he's the right man for the job, then he's the right man for the job. I've always said that when it comes in regard to Philadelphia Flyers, like staying true to their own and hiring him, right? But I get you're gonna get like another, just the drones of people say, and I'm not saying I'm not one of them. And Priz, I'd be open to Quinville too. I just question how he can relate to the younger players. Could you have another situation like that? But he's a great coach, great offensive-minded coach. But I just feel that like it's the same old story. You know what I mean? You keep on hiring ex-Flyers, right? If Brind'Amour, like I said, hardworking style can continue that, right? Like same points with Rick Tocchet, wouldn't miss too much of a beat with Torts, but enough's enough, really, with the former Flyers, right?
No, I mean, he's the only one.
Yeah,
he's the only one I would take the exception to because look at the success he's had as a coach. I mean, he hasn't won the cup yet, but he's had so much success.
Yeah, true.
And he builds team bonding and team chemistry, and he does everything as a team, and that's very important, especially for a team in the situation that the Flyers are in.
Now, to be fair, though, we have had a good string of coaches that are not former Flyers. If we go back to that, I mean, think of the recent coaches that the Flyers have had. You have the last one that was a former Flyer was Berube.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a long time ago. So with Chief no longer around, you then went through Elaine Vigneault, you went through Tarian, Yao. You also went through, now of course recently, Tortorella. You went through Hackstuhl. You went through, there was one other guy I'm missing. Was it Scott Gordon? I think it was Scott Gordon.
Technically, I would say technically, but with Scott Gordon being the coach of the Phantoms, would you put that under the same category, or would you consider that something else?
He was an interim, but he was still technically the coach at the time when he was up on the Flyers bench. So I guess you would say it counts. But the point is that really the Flyers haven't had a former Flyer behind the bench in a little while. And again, a lot of that has been a question of was it the coach or was it the organization behind that? Might be a little bit of both.
Yeah.
So going and grabbing Rod Brind'Amour, would it make me angry? No, it wouldn't make me angry. Do I think it will pay dividends? It could. But the real question is he the right kind of player to mold the young guys?
Yeah.
That's the real question.
And that's a fair question. I think yes. Just because of the culture that he brings and the culture that he enforces. I don't want to say enforces because he doesn't enforce the culture, but he does a very good job at bringing in guys that not necessarily going to fit a system, but buy into it. And, you know, I don't know if you guys have heard the story. Eric Halla was in and out of Carolina like that because he didn't buy into the system. He didn't buy into the culture. He didn't buy into any of the things that Rod Brindamore preached about. So they traded him pretty quickly.
Here's the thing, though, and this is the one thing I will say. Carolina, I feel like, really invested in Brindamore. My question is him and Danny going to have the same relationship? Just because they're two former Flyers doesn't necessarily mean they're going to agree with each other. Because Rod never played with Danny. He was long gone by the time Danny got here. So, actually, I think he was retired by the time that Danny got here. So, the point is that I don't know if they might have the same relationship. It may turn out to be one of those where someone's not buying into Brendamore's system, but Danny's refusing to let him go. And Danny's like, no, you're not just going to make changes whenever you feel like it. This is my team. That worries me a little bit, that we could start having that kind of an issue where the coach and the GM are now fighting each other. And that goes right back to the issues we had in the 2010s.
True. Yeah. I mean, I get it.
Why, he's a micromanager?
I mean, I don't know. Danny might not be. Danny may very well be hands-off. I mean, I think he was decently hands-off with Torts, I would say. I don't think he was micromanaging Torts.
All I know is it was a fucking tripod to begin the season, and now they're bickering. Like, what happened?
Right.
I was reading this article from The Athletic earlier today, and it lists 8 candidates that would be, like potentially good fits with the Philadelphia Flyers. We already mentioned one, Rick Tocchet. They mentioned Mike Sullivan if he leaves Pittsburgh. Brad Shaw, if they want to retain him. Lappy, because he's familiarity with coaching the guys for the Phantoms. David Carl, they mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy I'm not familiar with, Pat Frischweiler.
Pat Frischweiler. Interesting.
The Flyers love one of Frischweiler's pupils at Western, Alex Bump. To your point, they drafted in 2022, and they might be interested in the 55-year-old Frischweiler too. He was Jones's line mate in college, but he's been the head coach of Western Michigan since 2021. Jay Woodcroft, they mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay.
They mentioned if Lobby departs the Rangers, a reunion in Philadelphia. That's the last one they leave off on. That might be the clickbait option, number 8. But I mean, maybe.
Oh, he is gone by the end of he's gone at the end of the season. I can guarantee you that.
No, I don't want Lavi back here.
He is so gone. Oh.
No, I don't want Lavi here for the simple reason of this team. I think Lavi's the coach you bring when the team is ready to compete.
No, he's not there. He's the coach you bring in so that he can take you sliding down the mountain and crash into the wilderness. That's who he is.
Point is,
he's crashed 2 teams now. He crashed the Capitals and he crashed the Rangers.
Well, to be fair, the Capitals were on that slow decline. The Rangers on the opposite end, they were on the rise up. So, yeah, okay, there's a little bit of a different story with the Caps. But still the point being...
They still crashed, though.
I'm not saying they didn't crash. I'm just saying that when, we saw the Capitals were starting to incline a little bit and go down. The Rangers were on the way up. So it was a little different. Anyway, point being is that I'm not so sure because I feel like Lavi coming into a situation where the Flyers are not a playoff team right now. They're a bubble team at best. That's on a good year right now at this stage. I don't know if Lavi's necessarily the coach for that. I think Lavi's more of a coach that you put into place when a team is consistently in the playoffs. Because I don't know. There's not a big track record of him building teams up. There's more of him being in a position where their team's already competing or getting into the playoffs. Now, again, he did win a Stanley Cup. However, though, after winning the Cup with Carolina, he got fired the very next season. So it's like, and yes, he did get the Flyers to the 2010 Stanley Cup Finals. I'm aware of that. Again, though, look at the teams he was coaching. He coached Rod Brendamore in Carolina. He coached Danny B in 2010. So I feel like it's like he's in a situation where you're consistently competing, whereas other coaches come into a team that is still needing to be developed. They're a better fit for that. I don't know if Lavi necessarily is.
Hey guys, what about Greg Brown from BC?
Not familiar.
He's the coach of Boston College.
Oh, okay then. Interesting.
Yeah, they've had some. You think he's built a pretty good program there? The last few years, he's gotten some real good young players on that. He's recruited some real good young players. Now he hasn't won a national championship in a couple of years, but they've been right there every year. That team.
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed because he has created a really good program there. I mean, it's definitely
if
a good
Denver
option.
guy doesn't want to leave, he may not want to leave if he wins a national. Winning a national championship, he may want to have a little dynasty there and then leave.
I will say this: out of all the candidates that we've been talking about, who do you think has the most? Who do you think, if we were gambling men, who do we think we would be hedging our bets on?
Sullivan
For you, Brad. Okay.
Yep. I think he's the best. I think he's going to get fired, or he'll leave, and I think this would be a perfect team for him to go to. He's going to have all those young players. Look at how he fixed Pittsburgh and kept them up there for a long time.
Benny is throwing out Joel Ward.
Great player.
Was.
A very solid player.
There's a guy who liked to stand in front of the net.
Yeah.
If I had to be a gambling man, I would say the one with the best shot. Depending upon how Carolina does, right now I'm going to probably back the Sullivan. However, if Carolina does get eliminated, I would actually say, yeah, I think Brendan Moore just took his spot in terms of the higher chances. Robbie, how do you feel? If you were a gambling man, where would be hedging your bets at?
My money's on Tocchet. I think he's leaving Vancouver for this job.
Okay.
And like I said, I don't want to see. I would rather David Carl than Rick Tocchet. And I was pro Rick Tocchet in the past, right? But that's just how much admiration I have for what I know. Hey, we had a bad experience somewhat with Dave Haxtell, but David Carl is a totally different breed of coach, and I think would be a good fit here. Like I said, I would love Brendan Moore, right? If you're going to go former Flyer, I would definitely, you guys talk me into that with Brendan Moore, but I think it's going to be Tocchet.
All right. So Robbie's throwing his hat towards Tocchet. What about you, Bri? Who are you hitching on to?
I'm hitching on to David Carl. The more I'm reading about this dude, the more I absolutely want this guy to be the head coach of the Flyers. Assistant coach at 28 years old. I'm sorry, head coach at University of Denver at 28 years old. Led the Pioneers to 2 national championships in 2017, 2022, 3 tournament appearances. Led the Pioneers to the last 2 NCHC regular season championships, 2 frozen face-off titles, if I can get the freaking word out. Jesus Christ. 1 regular season title, coach of the year last year, and then he coached the U.S. national team to back-to-back gold medals, and I don't think the U.S. junior team ever dropped a game in regulation in those 2 tournaments. Give me David Carl.
Yeah.
All right.
28. You know what I was doing when I was 28?
We don't want to talk about that.
It wasn't coaching a hockey team. Yeah, we don't talk about that.
No, it definitely wasn't. We're not going to talk about what I was doing. I was
Remember, gentlemen.
Prick at 28.
Remember, this show is recorded, gentlemen.
Recorded in front of a live
studio audience.
Right.
Thank goodness you stopped me.
We look out for our own, Robbie. We look out for our own.
Right. So there are options out there. It'll be an interesting decision that Danny's got to make here. Again, it also depends on what we get in the Stanley Cup final or Stanley Cup playoffs, actually. Because there might be a couple of firings based off of those results, possibly. So we'll see. I mean, we've seen GMs in the past get a little squirrely with their choices of coach. Obviously, Dave Haxtell comes to mind. He was a hire by Ron Hextall. And then we've also seen the let's put the Band-Aid over the cancer situation where we saw Paul Holmgren immediately hand the coaching reins to Craig Berube after firing Peter Laviolette. And we've also seen times where we've made the big splash, where we saw Chuck Fletcher go out and grab Elaine Vigneault and then grab Chris Therien and Mike Yao. And we've seen all three of them have mixed results. Berube did get us into the playoffs. We didn't get out of the first round, though. And, Hack got us into the playoffs the second year. We didn't get out of the first round, though. And, Vigneault got us in. We got out of the first round. And then the less we talk about the ensuing years, the better. So, like I said, we've had mixed results through all three of those avenues. So Danny has it's going to be a tough decision for him. And my point is that this decision could make or break him, is what I'm trying to say. Because in a lot of ways, a lot of the decisions that were made at coach broke a lot of the GMs. I mean, think about it. Paul Holmgren made a knee-jerk reaction to firing Laviolette. Also, to be fair, Ed Snyder was breathing down his neck at the time. However, that eventually broke Paul Holmgren, and he was out of the GM position soon enough. Chuck Fletcher, same thing. Disaster happened. It wasn't long before he got himself fired. And Hextall, he got himself fired because he refused to cooperate with anybody. So, just saying, this is a tough part. This is a real tough part that GMs find themselves in, and recent history has not looked too kindly on it. So, I can't say that I'm excited. I'm very anxious about it. I'm very, very anxious because this is a very big decision for Danny that could make or break his regime real quick.
Yeah. No, I do.
I think we gave everybody some good candidates.
We did. Not saying we did.
The two best. We gave you the two best college coaches.
Right
now, and some really good NHL coaches.
Yeah, good experience.
Do you think the Kraken would keep Lisma after this year? They had a really bad year, and he's a very smart, good coach. I don't know what happened in Seattle, but I mean, I know he just was hired for 1 year. But what do you think about him?
I don't see Bosma getting fired off the first year. Especially with his repertoire, especially with his resume. I think he's a good fit for what they're trying to do. I also think they're in a situation where they're going to try and I think that last year was a fluke year. And I agree, Benny, you got to have a coach before the draft. I don't think Bosma's going anywhere. At least not until Jessica Campbell's ready to take over. Let's go.
History could almost be made very soon in Seattle. I mean, history is already made, but even made further.
I didn't put much stock towards Mike Sullivan, and I would be open to that too. In terms of there could be potentially a good breeding ground between, young college coaches and NHL experience, and that's going to be a big debate.
And we have to keep in mind too, when Mike Sullivan took over the Penguins. We were taught it's a different team that he took over. It's not a young team. This was a team that was made up of, it had Crosby, Malkin, it had a lot of the major pieces to the puzzle. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And the thing was that he took over in a team that already had won a cup not too long ago, had some very disappointing results in the playoffs recently, And you got to manage a locker room. That's got probably a lot of ego in there. So the question is, like, how do you manage that? You're walking into a real tough situation. If anything, I think Mike Sullivan might actually have it much easier being in charge of a Flyers team that's younger, that doesn't really have any room for ego at the end of the day. Not saying that you wouldn't find a young player with an ego, but at the same time, you have a better opportunity to mold it. And my point is, Sullivan still managed to mold the Penguins, managing through all of that and
Listen,
mold them into a unit.
The Penguins were continued to stink it up in the playoffs.
Right.
How many years in a row were they terrible? Okay, in the playoffs.
A good long while.
Yeah, and then the season they hired him, I mean, he was an assistant coach with the Rangers when they hired him, and they were marching right into the basement that year. And then Sullivan came in and fixed everything. And I just think he's a real good hockey mind. You know, he's been there. He's been through the battles. You know, I mean, he went through it with the Rangers. When the Rangers got to the finals, he was an assistant coach on that team. I think that there's a definite possibility there. You know,
it's just going to be the question of, does he want to coach a rebuilding team, or does he want to try and find a team that's about ready to take that next step and take a team into the playoffs? That's going to be the only question I have with Mike Sullivan. He's in my top five.
He's already won twice, though. That's the thing. So for him, he could prove something because people who want to be naysayers with him would say, well, you know, you had Crosby and you had Malkin and you had all these guys that underperformed in the playoffs, and you fixed it kind of the same way like in football when Chucky fixed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You know, I mean, you know, they had a great team and they couldn't win before. They changed coaches and they bring Chucky in, and then they win the championship. You know, but Chucky never actually built a team from the ground up and won a championship. So this could be a similar situation for him. You know, he may look at Pittsburgh and say, you know what, we're not even in a position where we can even start the rebuild because Crosby and Malkin still have another year on their contracts. I mean, they can't even consider starting a rebuild yet. So you're looking at 2 to 3 years with Pittsburgh where it's going to be really rough. And at least with the Flyers, you know, they're almost done with the rebuild. I would say after this off season, the rebuild is going to be over, and it's time for them to start hammering away and trying to win, because they'll have the farm system complete. They'll have all their picks in, you know, and you know, that's where it goes. And yes, SJM is right. Dungy did the same thing with the Colts, who could never get over the hump with you know, when he left Tampa. So sometimes you want to see if these guys have it in them to be able to build a team and get it over the top.
Yeah, but again, I'm more concerned about, is he going to want to go from coaching a playoff team to...
They're not a playoff team anymore. Pittsburgh hasn't been a playoff team the last 2 seasons.
But that doesn't still change the point that he's going to have to go to a rebuilding team. Is he going to want to do that? That's the question.
That's the unknown factor. And really, you don't know. I mean, it would make sense for Sullivan to go to the Hurricanes if they get rid of, if they decide to get rid of Brind'Amour too.
Right.
That would be something. That would be a place he could probably go as well. I'm just giving you guys, if I had my choice and Sullivan was willing to come to Philly, that would be the guy I'd want.
No, I understand. He's on my list too. Like, I like Mike Sullivan. I like him as a coach. I think he could be a good fit. But it's just a question of, does he want to go from Rangers, but, you know, from Pittsburgh to Philly? You're really going from one end to another. But honestly, I think as long as Crosby and Malkin are still under contract with Pittsburgh, I don't know if Mike Sullivan's going anywhere.
Well, Prism's saying why I want Quenneville, who had a young core in Chicago when he won 3, and he had a young core in Florida before he got fired because of the incident. Yeah, but that's not guaranteed that he would have won anything with Florida. It's not a guarantee. But at the same time, I will say this, though. as great as Quenneville was, and he did bring it all together, let's give a little bit of credit to the fact that the stars did align for Chicago in a few ways, because you got 2 generational players on that team. You had Patrick Kane and you had Taves. Without either one of them, even if you just have one, I don't know if the Blackhawks win 3 cups. They might win 1. They might win 2, possibly. Who knows? You needed both. You really needed both.
They had Hossa, too. Let's not forget him.
Yeah, but that was also because Hossa had put his foot in his mouth and got traded twice and then wound up going to Chicago because everyone thought he was busted at the end of the day. And turns out, no, he wasn't. He just put his foot in his mouth. But at the end of the day...
And he was a dog, and then the dog went back to being a great player again.
Right. Yeah. But, again, though, that's not to say Quenneville didn't have something to do with it. And yes, Duncan Keith absolutely was a big part of that too. But again, you're right, Priz. Keith was generational as well. But the point I'm saying is that things aligned very well for Chicago. That's how they won 3. So it wasn't just Quenneville. They had the players to make it happen.
What's his name? Seawright?
Seabrook.
Seabrook. Yeah, don't forget him. He was really good too.
They had Seabrook. They had traded to get Patrick Sharp. They had a lot of players in place to make something happen. And they did. Quenneville was able to put it all together. That's not taking anything away from him. I think a lesser coach would not have been able to do anything with that, even with all that talent on that Blackhawks team. He was able to do it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he could do the same thing for a Flyers team that right now, while we have Michkov, what else we got?
I mean, Forster. Proven. TK.
That's it. When you really boil it down.
And I'm with you. I'm hearing everything you're putting down, Matty, and I'm with you. And that's where this offseason is going to be very crucial for Danny moving forward. Is he going to be able to go out and get a high-priced free agent? Is he going to be able to go out and sign an RFA to an offer sheet, trade for the rights of somebody? Is he going to hit on the draft picks and bring more talent onto this roster? These are all questions that we're going to have to answer in the offseason. This is going to be crucial for how long this rebuild's going to take. There's definitely pieces, but there's a lot of unproven pieces. We need to see guys like Forster turn into the 30, 35 goal scorer. We need Tippett to find the scoring consistency. There's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. And like I said, it's all going to come down to what Danny does this offseason, and he's got to do something. He's going to have a lot of money to play with.
Right.
What about Daryl Sutter, guys?
Damn it.
Too old?
I don't know.
He's too old school. If they didn't like Tortorella, they're not going to like Daryl Sutter.
Yeah, Sutter.
He's worse.
He kind of wore his welcome
Stanley Cups, though.
He did, but he coached a Kings team that had some old Flyers players that were used to hard-nosed, and some other players from around the league that were hard-nosed, guys like Stoll and what have you, that weren't afraid to get their hands dirty. So I think that's why they liked working with him. So Dustin Brown was also not afraid to get his hands dirty too.
I'm just throwing a couple of guys, guys out there who, were Stanley Cup winners, multiple Stanley Cup winners.
He did.
Has he even coached since then? I don't know if he's even
since he got fired from Calgary.
Nope.
No.
Yeah, no, I don't think he has.
He kind of blacklisted himself. Like I said, he's a worse coach as far as like getting and digging into players than Tortorella ever was. He got fired real quick out of Calgary, and he basically blacklisted himself.
That's saying a lot.
So that is it. Prism says it best. Isn't he like 97 years old?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I think he's retired from coaching anyway.
Okay.
So that'll do it.
Threw him out.
So that'll do it for this edition of Flyers Talk A2D. We thank everybody for joining us once again. We thank the fam out there for joining us as well. You guys are the lifeblood of A2D. And next week we'll be back live as usual. And we know that the season is coming ever so closer to an end. We are about 9 games left, I believe, on the season. So not a whole lot of time left to watch some Flyers. So get it in while you can.
Baseball. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
By the way,
Right,
the
right.
Panthers suck. Just want to make sure everybody knows that.
Gotcha.
And
9
Ovechkin
seconds
down
to go.
to 4.
9 seconds, and you can't hold the lead for 9 seconds.
Who's with me for rooting for Ottawa to win the cup? G. Let's go.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, get you
Yes.
the cup before he
Before
he hits free
retires.
agency again.
Yeah, I
Ducks get the
definitely.
playoff. No, I'm just kidding.
I would like to see G get a cup before it's all said and done. But yeah, so next week we will not have a game to react to. Flyers will be playing on Wednesday, so they'll be playing your team, Brad, the Blue Shirts. So
They'll be out of it by then.
yeah. So even though we won't have a game to react to, we will definitely have plenty to talk about, I'm sure, as we get closer and closer to the end of the season and the debate on who the head coach will be continues on here in Philadelphia. And the battle for the Calder Trophy that hopefully Michkov could get his hands on continues. But until then, we'll see you all next time. We are brought to you by Specialized Physical Therapy. Hit up the Dr. Paul Vidal. From all of us here, we have our loves and thanks to each and every one of you. And we say peace and love. And we'll see you next week.
Ovi down.